and welcome to Inside Edition, where we discuss national, regional, and international issues in depth. ITHRA is an international teachers forum that aims to develop different teaching skills as well as promoting new perspectives of learning that can be implemented within educational institutions according to the highest quality standards and based on both students' and teachers' future needs. Hosting such an essential forum in the Kingdom of Bahrain comes in line with its commitment towards equipping Bahraini teachers with all required skills in order to ensure providing the young generation of Bahrain society with the best educational system, educators, and curriculums. To talk more about that, we are pleased to be joined here in the studio by the Dean of Bahrain Teachers College, Dr. Ted Purinton, right after this. Welcome back. Joining me here in the studio is the Dean of Bahrain Teachers College, Dr. Ted Purinton. How are you doing, Doctor?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming today. We've had you on the show before, but it's exciting now. After the pandemic and after a lot of the changes that have happening to the school year, whether it's the students coming back or the teachers coming back and all of these changes, there are a lot of programs that have been also administered now to your students at the Bahrain Teachers College, but also the students of your students, let's put it that way. So one of these really exciting ideas is the ITHRA Forum. Can you give us an idea about the ITHRA Forum, including what were its main aspects, the goals that it targeted?
Indeed, yes, the ITHRA Forum was an initiative in partnership with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And they brought together experts from around the world to work with teachers in Bahrain to provide professional development and to create a network of collaborative learning among teachers in the country. It was a really refreshing opportunity for teachers, gave them a boost in their skills and gave them opportunities to learn from each other and to talk about the exciting things that they do in their classrooms as teachers.
Absolutely. One of the things that the pandemic changed was the way teachers go on teaching now in the classrooms because of the big shift, whether it is in the subjects, whether it is in the availability of the students, whether it is the quick changing pace in case somebody gets sick or something like that. So what can you tell us about collaborations and events such as the ITHRA Forum? How do they expand the teachers' knowledge when it comes to doing their jobs?
Well, there's two parts to that. First, I think what the pandemic has always has taught us is that learning does not always have to be in a classroom with a teacher standing in the front. It can take place in a variety of ways. And this was a really good example modeled through the ITHRA Forum in that there were initial discussions before the pandemic about having this in person. When the pandemic came along, we realized it needed to be virtual.
Yeah.
And in many ways, that was a benefit because it expanded the availability of experts around the globe to be able to support teaching and learning for teachers in Bahrain. And it opened up more opportunities for us to invite people and to listen to experts that may not have been able to travel to Bahrain or could take the time to do that. So it mirrored something that we've really learned, which is that learning can take place in a variety of modalities, and through technology we can expand our horizons a bit. But it also, I would say, really demonstrated the continual importance of learning for teachers, that teaching is not something you just learn once and you're done and you can do it, but it's a constant process of renewal and improvement and growth.
Absolutely. When we look at the teachings that are presented to teachers, our teachers are basically trained. It's not just the aspect of giving this information and having the student absorb it, but as well understanding how the student absorbs information, psychological aspects that have to do with the environment of the student, with how many students are in the class, what kind of knowledge am I giving, is it more on the scientific end, is it more on the creative end? All of these things are things that you teach at the college to your teachers, because they need to have those kind of considerations. And as you've rightfully said, technology has a big helping hand in making that leap from our conservative regular teaching halls to now technologically supported education. What kind of technologies do you see will stay, that have appeared in the pandemic and will stay with us furthermore?
Well, we always had supporting technologies through a variety of means. And in fact, the Ministry of Education has been using Microsoft Teams and other Microsoft products in its schools for a long time before the pandemic came along. In many ways, when the pandemic occurred, there were a couple modifications, especially even giving some lessons over television right in the studio.
Right.
But most of what we did was not really new or different. It was an extension of what we'd already been doing. And what it really taught us is that that growth and learning for teachers and for students, for adults, for everyone, does not ever stop. And we can continue working on improving ourselves in a variety of methods and places and times.
Yeah. When I looked at some of the footage or the history of ITHRA Forum and the footage that came with it, you see that there's a lot of focus on the collaboration between students and teachers in gaining knowledge. And that is not an old, it's not a new topic that we've known about, but in reality, the way to involve students in education has differed a lot because of technology and because of the way the pandemic let us go through the educational process. So what can you tell us about other aspects that the forum really introduced or heightened or really showcased?
Well, as I said earlier, the idea that learning is a progression and it never ends is something that was really reinforced in that there were cycles of learning. And this is, I think, the most important part of teacher professional development. You don't just learn something and then you have it. You have to learn it, you have to try it, you have to reflect on it, you have to collect data on it, you have to analyze how it worked, and then you try it again. And then you keep getting better at it, and then you keep seeking knowledge to support further development. It's a cycle, it's a process. And that was embedded into every aspect of this forum. There were no parts that were isolated from real life with real students in classrooms. It was all about making sure that teachers got to try and experiment and practice and reflect upon what they were learning.
Amazing. Well, the forum discussed the development of creativity and problem solving among students specifically. What is the importance of enhancing the student's personality and developing his or her scientific life and professional success in the future?
Well, I think for many, many years, employers have been telling universities and schools that they want 21st century skills, or sometimes not the best named term, soft skills, because soft skills are not really soft. They're very critical, and so critical, in fact, that employers constantly tell universities and schools that the social skills, the creativity skills, the problem solving skills, the lifelong learning skills are as important, and sometimes if not more important than the technical skills that are learned from specific disciplines. And so, as the world of technology and knowledge changes over time, we want students, for example, to be able to constantly update their knowledge and to see themselves as lifelong learners. And we want them to be on-the-spot problem solvers, creative thinkers. And you don't always get that from the traditional academic disciplines. Sometimes you need to gain those skills from a variety of experiential and educational circumstances. And so the forum really did encourage that quite a bit for teachers and helped teachers see how they can extend beyond their subject areas and ensure that students have the skills to communicate, to collaborate, to work in a team to solve problems that can't be defined by a traditional academic subject.
Absolutely. Adaptation, I think, is the key word here, where students learn to adapt to different circumstances, because we're not anymore in this traditional kind of environment when it comes to education. A lot more students are leaving the country and studying abroad, or we have a lot of exchange students coming in, or we have even different topics that are being addressed and taught. So adapting to these new things is key. The harder it is to adapt, the more difficult it will be to learn new things. So a number of international experts actually took part in the forum's discussions and lectures. How do you value this kind of participation, and how did it contribute positively to achieving the goals that you had set for yourself?
So I'll put this in the context of the history of the Bahrain Teachers College. The college was founded in 2008 based on an initiative of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and now Prime Minister, as a method to improve learning outcomes of students through teacher skill. Yeah. And the country has been really progressing on that over the past 14 years, and now at a level where we're ready for even bigger and better and more exciting things to come. And the Ethra Forum came at a point in time that sort of highlighted the successes so far, and pave the way for future opportunities for teacher learning and educational development in the country. And so the international experts that were invited to speak and work with teachers continued the idea that this is we're working with teachers who are part of a profession that are using a knowledge base that has been developed around the world. And even though at the Bahrain Teachers College we work very hard to adapt that knowledge to the local context, it still is a global knowledge base, and the teachers in Bahrain deserve to hear from people from around the world and to hear from the experts and the people on the cutting edge of innovations.
Definitely. One very important factor to mention is that the teachers of Bahrain are also innovators when it comes to how to teach subjects or how to teach certain topics, as well as introducing new kind of topics to the students. Before we started today, we talked about how there are some different things that should be taught from childhood to students from school age. How do you see the adaptation of the teachers to new topics, or let's say innovative topics like that?
Well, they're very avid learners and they really want to grow, and so this was not very hard to get people to be active participants in this. The teachers in this country really are passionate about what they do, and they want to improve their practice. And so in attending workshops and listening to lectures and collaborating with their peers, I think one of the things that stood out the most is the concept of engagement of students. Yeah. We can, of course, know our subject matter really, really well, but if we can't help turn a student on to subjects they may not normally or naturally be inclined toward, is a very hard skill. Yeah. It's a very complicated thing for a teacher to do, especially when their focus might just be on their subject matter. So the forum, and I think it really is embedded in everything we do at the Bahrain Teachers College, focus a lot on how to give teachers the skills to make students excited and interested about their learning. Classroom management problems go away when students are engaged. Learning increases when students are engaged. Right. And so when we can engage students, we solve so many educational problems and increase their learning outcomes. Yeah.
Even the students of your college themselves are introduced to not newer topics, but different ways of teaching topics. We've known that for years now we have computer subjects entering our curriculums. We've had as well subjects that pertain to scientific aspects, laboratory, that kind of stuff. Also, when it comes to technologies, innovation, workshops, all that kind of stuff are things that are integrating now in schools. And so the teachers had to actually actually change the way they learn, because they had to learn these new techniques. What can you tell us about the adaptation of these new techniques in these new subjects that are being taught in curriculums now?
Well, it was really interesting because BTC faculty are really excellent at engaging their students, the future teachers, through group work and through discussion and dialogue and collaboration and practical work in particular. And so there were, of course, challenges that we all faced around the world during the pandemic about how to keep that going in an online environment. And I was really impressed to see that it worked quite well. And in fact, in the very first term of the pandemic, since all the schools were closed, we had our students, every year of our undergraduate program, our students do internship work within the schools in the Ministry of Education. So what we had on that very first term where everything was closed, we had them do online lessons. We had them engage in various forms of online teaching and learning. And they've really responded well to that because they know that that is not only a skill that could come back at some time if there's another pandemic in the future, but also those are skills that we can use all the time in supplementing our normal face-to-face teaching.
Absolutely. Before we go more into the participation and the panel discussions that happened in the forum, when we look at education now after the pandemic, during the pandemic, and education before, I mean, for years, hundreds of years, if not hundreds of years, we had a simple education structure. Somebody has the knowledge, somebody sells the knowledge to someone who doesn't. They absorb the knowledge and they go on and it moves on. But after the pandemic, a lot of changes happened. Do you see changes that you would consider, we should have done it this way all along? Like certain things, the ways of teaching?
Well, I have to say, especially at the Bahrain Teachers College, I think we didn't necessarily see something different. We knew it all along, and we were doing it all along. It just confirmed to us that we were doing the right thing all along. And that is that, as you said, we're not just focused on transferring bits of knowledge, but we're building skills in our students. And we're giving them chances to learn and explore and grow in collaborative and engaging and creative ways. And that can also happen in online environments. And so it really did, I think, confirm to us that all along we had the right approach.
Absolutely. So during the forum, certain discussions were happening between the experts in the field. So you have participated, or a number of, you have actually participated in one of the first panel discussions in the forum regarding the 21st century education. What can you tell us about that topic specifically?
So in my talk that day, I focused on the profession of teaching and what it means historically and in the future. And then I put it also in the context of the Bahrain Teachers College and how the Bahrain Teachers College exemplifies the idea of knowledge, a knowledge base that informs our practice as educators. And it was a good way to kick off the forum, I think, because we wanted to remind ourselves that teaching is a practice that is informed not only locally through our own experiences in our own schools and in collaboration with other teachers, but in particular through a global knowledge base of teachers and educators from around the world that are innovating and giving us new insights about how children and youth learn and how that learning translates into measurable outcomes that we see through educational achievement, through future employment, and a variety of other lifetime markers of each individual person.
One of the things that we've seen, or there was a lot of documentation reporting on, is that students with learning disabilities have actually thrived more in the educational environment after or during the pandemic because there was more visual teaching, auditory teaching, and they were able to adapt to the children's needs. Can you tell us, is there going to be a difference between how the education process, specifically for students with learning disabilities or even students that have more difficulties in schools, will there be something that will change from now on that the pandemic has introduced?
Yeah, so one of the concepts that was discussed frequently was the idea that in the pandemic, of course, there were some students that kind of got lost because they thrived more in a social classroom environment. But then, of course, as you said, there were some students that benefited tremendously. And I think as we look for the best practices around the world, I discussed this with the Ministry of Education in February in a discussion on post-pandemic education innovations. And my presentation there, similar to throughout the ETHRA Forum, focused on the idea that that oftentimes the role of a teacher is not, as we said, to just present content and transfer knowledge from one person to another, but to diagnose a learning need in a student and to problem solve to help that student find the way for him or her to move forward. That really happened a lot in the online portion of schooling over the past couple of years, and I think we will take that forward, especially because we're seeing more and more how we can help students with learning needs thrive both online and in person.
Amazing. From your point of view, how do you value hosting these kind of vital forums in the kingdom, and this is considered one of the leading regional countries in the educational field?
Yeah, so it's like I said earlier, it comes at a really exciting time in the country's educational development. For example, there's a national strategic plan for education, a committee chaired by His Excellency, the Minister of Youth and Sport, Ayman Al-Moyad. I'm a member of that committee, and it's looking at how do we take the successes from the previous strategic plan that created, for example, the Bahrain Teachers College, and expand on that and make them even better and more exciting and more progressive leading up to 2030. The ETHRA Forum really cemented the idea that teachers are key to all of those educational reforms, and teachers need to constantly see themselves as active participants and active players in reform and improvement, and that unless they have opportunities to learn and grow, that education improvement can't take place at the same rate.
Right.
We can see in many ways the forum as a wonderful, visible signal of commitment to teachers' development in the country.
It's a joint effort, needs to be a joint effort in order for it to succeed. While the forum itself and the discussions that took place in the forum had certain outcomes at the end of it, what are these suggested procedures and outcomes, and are we going to implement them?
Well, I think mostly it is a model of what good productive teacher development looks like. Teacher development historically or traditionally is learning in a classroom, maybe at a university, maybe with a faculty member, and of course we do that, and there's a place for that. It is important. But learning also happens in constructive collaborative environments, and we see more and more throughout the world that teacher networks and teacher collegiality is critical to improving performance. And so I think what it really did was help model the best practices of good teacher development that doesn't always take place from listening to a lecture and memorizing content and taking an exam. It often takes place in a social environment of teachers working together to solve common problems in classrooms.
Absolutely. From your point of view as a professional in this line of business for a while now, and after the pandemic and after a forum like this, what is, in your view, the most important skills a professional teacher should have in order to get the information over and have a successful kind of outcome with their students?
Well, I'd say the very first most important is having the right attitude and a disposition of care for children and youth, and a desire to see that they play a very important role in human development. That, to me, if you don't have that skill or that behavior, that attitude of care and an enjoyment of helping children and youth develop themselves, teaching can be a very difficult and sometimes impossible job. As I said earlier, engagement, I think, is the other real big skill that is in my opinion, the key to ensuring successful learning outcomes. We often historically have thought that subject matter was central. As we know, most of the skills that we have are not in tidy boxes of academic disciplines. They're cross-cutting skills that give every human the ability to deal with day-to-day problems. And so engagement of students through real-life problems and real-life scenarios and real-life issues to help bring them into academic achievement is, I think, is a very challenging skill, but it also tends to be the most important in nearly every learning outcome in a formal environment.
Definitely. One of the things that you guys actually apply to your students, the future teachers, is having them do or practice actually through an internship in local schools, government schools, public schools, different school settings. How do you value the experience of the college graduates during this internship and after graduating and becoming part of the schooling society?
Well, it is probably the most important component of our work. Okay. We call it teaching practice. Other countries call it student teaching or teaching internship. It's a global trend in teacher education, and so when we developed this at the beginning of BTC, it was part of that global movement to make sure that teacher training was very practical. Teacher training happened within real contexts. And that's unusual in a university environment, which takes place mostly in university classrooms, getting students out into their workplaces and having them practice and experiment, but with the guidance of our faculty members. Right. Our faculty members go out into the classrooms with them, observe their lessons, meet with them before and after the lessons, give them tips, and coach them to be better educators, better instructors. And our students, especially upon graduation, tell us that it is the most important factor in their teaching success in their first few years of teaching. They are very clear about the importance of this, that without it, they would feel in their first few years uncertain and not as skilled and expert as they have become. And it is really impressive. When I visit classrooms and I see our graduates, I'm sometimes so taken by the what I see in the classroom, I forget what time it is, and it is a really exciting thing to be sucked into a learning experience in a classroom of one of our graduates.
I absolutely see that, especially like if you have a job like that where you don't know what the circumstances that you're going to be in exists. There are different circumstances differing with the different ages, different subject matter that's being taught and everything. When you're in that moment and your full focus is on giving the utmost and the best quality, you won't have any time to know what time it is or how long you've been teaching.
Indeed.
Your trigger is going to be, do they understand the questions that are coming in? So I totally see how that is a valuable experience. What can you tell us about the BTC's achievements and what are the procedures taken to maintain these accomplished successes?
So we've done quite a bit over the past 14 years. Last year was a real monumental year for the college. We expanded our enrollment significantly with the goal set by the government to make sure that 80% of the teachers in the Ministry of Education have a qualification from BTC, and to further centralize teacher professional learning in the college from across the country. And we really made an enormous level of progress on that last year. The plan is to keep moving toward that by offering new in-service diplomas and in-service trainings for various positions. In particular, after the restructure of the Ministry of Education, new positions were identified, or existing positions that need more training were identified. And so we will be able to expand who we are serving in the ministry by supporting teachers of different subject areas, as well as new roles that are meant to support student learning in all aspects of the ministry. And so we will continue towards that as we seek to broaden the not only the enrollment of the college, but the scope of what we do with the Ministry of Education.
That's amazing. When I look at everything that you're saying now, there are a lot of things that you are planning on doing now because of the things that you have experienced or went through, or the pandemic and what it put us through, as well as the new innovations and technologies that are available, and also, of course, experiencing a forum such as the ITHRA forum and wanting to do something similar. What can you tell us about the BTC's upcoming projects? What are some of the prepared plans that you've set up to accomplish?
Well, we're currently in the process of obtaining international accreditation. We are working with other universities from around the world in partnership for joint delivery of or dual delivery of programs. We're working with, for example, right now with Harvard University. Their Graduate School of Education is training approximately 60 of our faculty members right now in new techniques on student assessment. We're working with the Zurich University of Teacher Education on building job skills from a very early age into the curriculum, where we can make sure that our graduates are, even at year one, with year one students, able to start building the foundations that they will need for their entire life as productive citizens. We're working with a variety of other organizations as well to build skills, to open new programs, and to expand our enrollment and make sure that we meet all of the targets set for us by 2030 by the government.
That's amazing. Before we let you go, my last question to you is, in this kind of environment that has been set, whether after the pandemic or continuously, there is this kind of hybrid teaching environment, whether it's at the college itself or for the students for a while now, but now things are getting back to normal. Do you see certain things that will stay in the technological field because of the pandemic that will keep on going on? Is hybrid classrooms an idea that you guys are adapting to?
Indeed, and it is really interesting that some of the innovations that come from us are not actually technological, but the technology allows us to do this. So, for example, we've learned more and more that if you can give a really excellent lecture and scale that up to lots and lots of people, and then allow the face-to-face time, the time when students are in classrooms, the opportunity to get support on any of their learning needs directly from a teacher who has time freed up to do that now, or for more active and participatory activities with students and their colleagues, and so forth. We are given time through technology to do things more productively face to face.
Amazing, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for being with us today and for answering our questions. And good luck with all of these set goals that you have coming up, and see how that goes.
Thank you. It's an exciting opportunity, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.